everybody. Welcome to the penultimate day of the 39th Mill Valley Film Festival. Great to see you all here. I'm Zoe Elton, and I'm thrilled to see you on this rainy day, and I can't decide whether rain or sun is a better outside thing to be happening, to be coming into a dark... You prefer the rain? Okay, all right. I think one of the great things about rain is that it sort of makes you internal, which is kind of a great way to come into a workshop like this. Mind the Gap is our women's initiative that we started last year at Mill Valley Film Festival. Thank you. And we've been getting some great support for it, and some great feedback. And Valerie and I were just talking now, it's like, I really wanted us to address as a festival what we can actually do, but what we can actually do that will proactively make and support change. You know, I mean, and I think really where it comes back to is that each one of us is a part of that. So for the festival, we're showing a lot of films that are written, directed, produced by women, and that have female-forward stories, regardless of whether they're written and directed by men or women. And a lot of it for us is raising awareness about what the discussions are and how we really encourage the work. So last year, Valerie was here with her film A Light Beneath Their Feet, which won one of our audience awards, which was kind of great. And so we've kept in touch over the year, and she has a new film, The Archer, which is very new, actually, yeah. So I asked her if we could do something around that at the festival. I mean, I really like it when we can have not just the conversations, but the ongoing conversations and reflection on people's work and where they're going and how their work develops. And Tom Schlesinger has worked with us at the festival for years, and the Heroine's Journey workshops, which he and Pamela Gray launched here last year, have become a great way of articulating how we understand women's stories. So I am very, very grateful that both of you are here today, and I will hand over to you, Tom, as we go on this particular journey. Thank you.
So welcome everyone. Toward the end of this session, we'll have plenty of time for question and answers. So as they come up, just kind of keep a little mental note, and then at the end we'll be able to kind of address very specific things. How many of you are actually involved in making movies, and making movies from a female perspective? Okay, well, you're in the right place. So we're going to welcome Valerie.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Zoe, for that beautiful introduction. I'm also grateful to be here.
We're going to focus on Valerie's next two films. One is The Archer, which there'll be a sneak preview of at 2 o'clock today, so it'll be fascinating for you to take a look at that in light of what we'll be talking about. And then a new film that Valerie just shot for Amazon, we're going to address after we talk about The Archer. But first I want to back up a little bit, because Valerie has had a very storied life, and you didn't wake up when you were 13 and say, I want to make movies. So what was what was your first life goal, and then how did that transition into being a filmmaker?
Sure. So, you know, even if I did wake up and say I wanted to make movies at 13, I didn't know how you go about doing that. I became interested in acting when I was about 5 years old. I remember my parents are Jewish, and I'm the youngest of 3, and I think we had some book about the Holocaust sitting around and that I wasn't probably supposed to read at a young age, that I looked at and saw, read about this atrocity, and I suddenly became very aware of how short life is, and a little depressed about it, actually, and had this epiphany that, oh my God, if I were an actor, I'd get to live so many lives in the one container of my own life, and thinking, oh, this is just so great that I figured this out. And I remember telling my dad, okay, Dad, I figured out what I'm going to be when I grow up. I'm going to be an actress. And he's like, no, you're not going to be a doctor. Again, Jewish parents. And so I sort of struggled with this idea that I wanted this creative, inquisitive life, but there's this practical thing, of supporting yourself that you have to think about. And so, I took acting classes and studied acting for a long time, and my parents were very supportive of that as a hobby. So I had a little bit of a split in me about what I wanted to do versus what I thought I could do. And in 10th grade, I had this amazing biology teacher, Mr. Sharambura, who taught biology like a story. He'd been in the Peace Corps and had malaria twice, and just kind of talked about the origin of life like the most fascinating story ever. And so something clicked for me there, and I was like, wow, I really think intellectually or academically this is a pursuit I want to do in conjunction with the arts. And so I went to college at Princeton and majored in molecular biology and minored in theater and dance, still expecting to sort of, do both until I couldn't. And I got the opportunity to direct my first play when I was a sophomore, and I just fell in love with it. I was like, okay, this is the perfect marriage of my analytical side and my more creative side. And so that's when I knew I wanted to be a director, but I still didn't know, well, how do you do this? How do you make a living doing this? So I pursued science to the point of getting a PhD in biophysics at Harvard, and started a film program there for grad students, because I was like, okay, well, I want to learn how to do this. Oh my God, Milena, I love your outfit. Hi. Wow. That'll become clear after you see the movie. Anyway, that was my film school. I was able to bring film professionals to speak at Harvard, and got to meet people like Jim Toback and Dylan Kidd and Brad Anderson and Uta Brieswitz, and that was really how I learned filmmaking. And I defended my thesis 2 weeks after wrapping my first film, and decided I was never going to do another experiment again. I was going to move to Hollywood and make movies.
A lot of what we'll be discussing today is just how Valerie's life became an inspiration for the films that she was making. Because then some of you have gone to some of the either Hero's Journey or Heroine's Journey workshops. Well, at least the approach that I take is that when you're making a film, you're on a parallel journey emotionally with the characters. And so that the first film you made very much came out of your personal experience. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So my first feature is called Losing Control, and it's about a female scientist who wants proof that her boyfriend's the one. It's a romantic comedy. And it was very much based on my life in grad school. I mean, literally taken from people I had met and experiences I had, embellished for the comedy, but, the essence of the feelings and what that character's going through was very personal to me. And so that was a great experience to write and direct a film that was so important and familiar to me. And then, ever since then, even though I haven't written my last 3 films, I figured out about myself, I cannot make a movie that doesn't feel personal. I need to own it. And I think a lot of what we'll talk about today is how the process of when I'm doing a script I didn't write, how I make it mine.
Mm-hmm. Great. Why don't we show the trailer from The Light Beneath Their Feet, which would be the film you made after that. You can talk a little bit about that, then we'll move into the Archer and so on. So can we show the trailer from The Light Beneath Their Feet, please? This is a good time to breathe.
Yeah.
Good time to breathe.
The frame rate's a little funky, so just ignore if it's a little skippy. Time for a disclaimer.
Mom! I'm so glad you're staying close next year.
What shape, Mom? Tell me.
Big heart. So much love.
Who doesn't want you to go to UCLA, Mom or Dad?
They don't even know I applied. I want to get off my meds.
What would happen if you went off your meds? Let's think this through.
I risk losing Beth again.
What was she like before?
Before she was diagnosed?
I know some stuff about Beth. When she was 5, her mom kidnapped her.
You missed your blue pill last night and this morning.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta go to the pharmacy before work.
Do I have to? Because I'm like right on the edge and I feel perfect. Perfect. Why are you changing everything when I'm about to have the biggest change of my life?
You don't understand. This is your chance. You have to create your own life. She'll take all of it.
I just wanted to go home for one night.
I think if you decide to love someone, you can see who they really are, even if they have problems.
Another aspect of the heroine's journey is that if you stay true to the emotional journey you're on while you're making the film, that ultimately that's the journey the audience will take when they watch it. And this film is just a gorgeous tapestry of emotional experiences between the mother and daughter. So I'm kind of curious what it was like for you during this time to be, immersed in these deep emotions while you were making the film and editing the film.
Thank you so much, and thanks for asking that. It was a very emotional journey, and I like what you said. We talked about in the car actually about this idea of if the emotional journey is solid, your audience will be on board with you. And I never thought about screenwriting exactly like that, but I think you're so right. And so I read this script written by Moira McMahon Leaper, and I was very attracted to a lot of it. It was funny and sad, but what I was most attracted to was that what I thought I could bring to it, which was being able to really understand both the mom's perspective and the daughter's perspective. I have 2 young daughters who now are 8 and 5, and I'm really close with my own mother. And I really felt like rather than tell a disease of the week story or a sensational mental illness story, I really wanted to tell the story of their bond and how it could be something that was really a nurturing, fulfilling thing, but also something that was very depleting as well. And it bounces back and forth, as I think many relationships do. And so what I'm really proud of with the movie is that I think, from what I hear, is that you really do identify with both equally, and you're not judging the daughter or the mother for the way they are, but you live in that really uncomfortable space between the two of them, which was really important to me. And it was very emotional. I went away for 7 weeks to make the movie and didn't see my family at all. We shot in Chicago, and my daughters missed me, and there was a lot of crying, and I know that the movie meant a lot to our 2 lead actresses, Taryn Manning and Madison Davenport, who are just so amazing in the movie. And they are both very close with their own mothers. And so I think it tapped into a lot of very authentic emotions for all of us that I think we all left on the screen. And I think you feel it when you watch it.
For sure. It's if you haven't seen the film, it's definitely one to watch and study, just in terms of the power of the emotional journey while watching it. And a lot of times there's a lot of books on screenwriting and a lot of workshops and things like that, but at a certain point you really have to go in and become the audience while you're reading your script and seeing it on screen, or in the editing room and see, well, what's the journey that I'm on? What's the emotional journey that I'm on? Now, you started out with the romantic comedy, and then you came into a very serious and beautiful drama, and now we can kind of move into the Archer. So you're not going to get branded as one type of filmmaker. Maybe you can tell us how, how you learned about the Archer and kind of how the process of kind of committing to doing it.
Sure. So, I really feel like I don't choose my projects. I always thought I would, but they really have chosen me. I never expected to do, other than my first film, any of these projects that have come my way, which I think is a really interesting lesson about life and something I never expected. But so after I made A Light Beneath Their Feet, this amazing executive, Hannah Pillimer, who now is the president of production at Mar Vista, she called me in for a general meeting because another female director who had done a movie for them, who's amazing, she recommended me to them and said, you should really meet with them. And I had a general, and they do a lot of movies that go to Lifetime and sell internationally and sort of have a lot of consistencies in what they do, but they were looking to sort of expand and nurture this more independent feeling arm of films, more festival, artistic films. And so they said, we love what you're doing. We'd like to find something to do together. And so about 4 months later, they sent me a script. And I remember Hannah's email. She's like, we think it's really badass. We need some development on it, but it's different for us, but would you like to do it? And I know we're going to talk more about it, so I won't say too much here. But basically, there was a real kernel of something really interesting to me as a woman, as a feminist, given our political environment, this idea of, okay, I hadn't thought about doing an action film before, but I've seen this, and I think I have a take on this that hasn't been done, and that uses my skill set of bringing really emotional characters and filmmaking to it, and I'd like to give this a try. So.
Yes, and besides the narrative arc, the beauty of these films is that they create a wide range of emotional experiences for the audience. It's not just Charles Bronson pissed off, which is one emotion, but not all the emotions. But maybe just as an intro, we can show the first clip. Do you want to say something about it before we see it?
So, I'll give you a little context. I don't want to give away too much because hopefully at 2 o'clock you'll all come see the first ever, public screening of this film. So it's called The Archer. And I've kind of been describing it as Thelma and Louise meets First Blood. And it's this young woman in this clip you're going to see. She has just won, I shouldn't even say that. She has just had a high school meet of some sort. And she is celebrating with her best friend. And it's pretty early in the movie, so I don't even know that I need to say much more.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Perfect.
So let's please show the first film clip from The Archer. Breathing time, everyone, breathing time.
Emily!
Is that Daniel? I texted him for the meet. I didn't think he was gonna come.
Don't answer it.
I have to.
Hey, babe.
Hey.
Damn. Guess somebody was waiting up for me.
Actually, it's getting kind of late, and Lauren and I have to get up early for the
So let her drive. Christ knows she's not having fun tonight. Hey, Lauren! Why don't you take a walk and give us a little time?
There's no way I'd leave her alone with you.
Are you gonna let her talk to me like that?
No. Daniel, I'm gonna go to sleep.
Hey, let her go.
I drove 4 hours to be here with you.
No, stop it! Daniel.
Sorry?
Yes, ma'am. So it hasn't been described as touchy-feely.
There's some touching and some feeling. You saw that at the beginning of the clip.
Maybe we can just take a moment, because in the filmmaking process, and very much the kind of the feminine approach, is bringing together a team to work on the film. Maybe you can talk a little bit about bringing the team together and the casting.
Well, first of all, I have an amazing team, many of who are here today, and I'm so touched. They came all the way from LA, and someone came from Georgia, and I'll introduce you to everybody a little later, but we had an amazing team. So, you know, this all really started with Hannah, our executive at Mar Vista, who is just a phenomenal person and so smart and so cool, and I think her amazingness has sort of trickled down to everybody who worked on this film. And so the first person who came on board, and I'm so grateful, is Ruth Dew, who's here, our producer. Ruth, raise your hand. That's Ruth over there. She's incredible. So, you know, an action film is not an inexpensive film to make. And, you know, because Mar Vista was taking risks of doing something a little bit off-brand, they, you know, our budget was small. Like, it was this, you know, I don't think I can talk about it, but comparable to, you know, Light Beneath and other things I've done. So not big. And I remember reading it, and I'm a producer. I've raised money for my projects, and I was like, wow, I'll do this, but I need to know a producer thinks it's possible, because I don't know that I could even make this budget work. And so if they get me a badass producer who really believes they can do it, then I'm in. And so Ruth came on board, and she was just incredible, so positive, so can-do. I think this is probably your biggest. Was this your most ambitious project too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you did a whole movie in a pool, which was also ambitious, but I think in terms of like locations and stunts and yeah, so Ruth just set another amazing tone of just positivity and honesty and collaboration and great notes, and so smart. And so so Ruth was great, and then we got a great casting director, Michael Testa, who works a lot with this company and does tons of other projects. And he just really, I think, you know, the script, we talked about this a little bit, you could read it and go different directions with this, and I was looking to make something a lot more nuanced than maybe was what was on the page, and Michael really listened to me and brought incredible talent to the table for us. We cast Bailey Noble, who plays the lead, who you just saw, and she's phenomenal. We actually, because of Mill Valley, we got connected. She was dating Carter Jenkins at the time, who's in Light Beneath Their Feet, and he had brought her to the premiere, and I'd heard about her, and I knew Mar Vista was really interested in her, and so I kind of had eyes on her before I met her up here, and this is where we first talked about this project. So thank you, Mill Valley. Yeah, and then Bill Sage came on as our antagonist, who you'll meet in a couple of scenes, and he is, wow, just an incredibly talented actor. And you know, it's a female-driven movie, and the men could potentially be seen as, you know, more monstrous, and I really wanted them to be three-dimensional, and by casting Bill Sage and Michael Grant Terry as the men in this movie, it really brought the dimension I was looking for, and they were just amazing. And Janine Mason, who won So You Think You Can Dance season 5, I think, she's in it, and she does all her own stunts. She's incredible. So anyway, I was lucky. I worked with a great cast, and Kurt Fuller, who I worked with on Light Beneath, came back for a role. And then our editor, Sarah Reeves, who's here, is just amazing, helped shape this movie. And we only had 6 weeks to edit this whole feature, and we worked literally round the clock. Yeah, we were always at Swingers getting food. And yeah, she's just incredible. So I'm really grateful for this team that we were able to assemble.
Editors are my heroines. They are. They really are. It should be a whole workshop in itself, and so well done. Well done. Also to you too, Ruth. Good job.
Oh, and Alexis is here. Alexis, raise your hand. Alexis is our youngest star of the movie, and she is here today, and she's phenomenal.
Nice. So, Natalie Goldberg wrote this amazing book called Writing Down the Bones. I don't know if you've read. Has anyone read Writing Down the Bones? Yeah. She has a really wonderful definition of storytelling. And she says storytelling is telling the truth through concrete details. Telling the truth through concrete details. And there's one scene in particular that we've watched and we've talked about in the locker room, where you bring in that detail. Maybe we should show the clip and then you can talk about how it evolved and how it came to that. Okay, good.
Perfect.
So let's please show clip number 2 from The Archer.
This is where we get up and breathe?
Yes.
Right now? Okay, let's do it.
No jewelry.
So maybe we can start for a moment with you guys, because the cinema is about visual storytelling, and I know you don't know the film, but obviously she's checking into a juvenile facility, into the detention center. So what does this mean to you when you see her taking her clothes off and putting on the jail garb? I mean, what feelings come up for you when you see something like this? Just spontaneously, it's not about right or wrong answers.
Outrage.
So it brings up outrage,
Scary. Humiliation.
humiliation,
Shifting identities.
shifting identities.
Fear.
Good.
Fear.
Fear and probably dread.
Loss of independence.
Loss of independence. Good.
The gravity.
The gravity of the situation.
Unfairness.
The feeling of unfairness and injustice. And
Danger.
hopelessness.
Danger from the underwear holes.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of those underwear. I made those hose myself. I did.
Yeah. What else?
I thought of many of those things, but I also was listening to the music sound design that was the overlay of it, because I kind of think in terms of, I wonder why they made that choice in the sound design. It was really good.
It's great.
Yep.
Our
Maybe
composer
that'd
is
be-
Paul Doucette. He's so great. It's our second project together.
That would be a good kind of jumping off point, because the sound design also in the previous clip is amazing.
Oh, great.
Yeah. As well as in this clip. Yeah.
Sarah and Trip and Chris.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a lot went into our sound design. We only had 6 weeks to edit, but Sarah's assistant, Chris, what's Chris's last name?
Gorell.
Chris Gorell, He worked round the clock also working on that in tandem, and Sarah works on amazing shows like Gotham and American Horror Story, so has a real rich education in sound design. And so, especially with an action movie, so much of what you're feeling is in the sound design. So we were able to walk into post-production at Monkeyland, where I've mixed all my films, with a really rich design. And Sarah was amazing because she came to the mix and she noticed things were missing and she fought for them. And I was so tired. And she's like, no, that one little thing is missing. We have to have it. I was like, I'm so tired, Sarah. Just, okay, fine. And yeah, so I'm really glad that's feeling impactful, because yeah, a lot of work went into that.
And just the behind the scenes of putting that together, that going from the script to the screen, did you realize that something in terms of
the scene that we watched? Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So I know we're going to get into more about how the script evolved, but I remember, I sent the script to this film critic, Matt Fagerholm, who you may have seen his name on the trailer for Light Beneath. We met because he saw that movie at Chicago Film Festival, and he had actually written the catalog description of it, and he just loved Light Beneath and gave us his first ever 4-star review for RogerEbert.com. And so he's become a friend and confidant. And so in doing this, I sent him the script and I said, if you have any movie references or thoughts before I make this, I would love to know what you have to say. And he really liked the script, and one thing he said is, Valerie, what I loved about Light Beneath is all those private moments your characters had, that we got to be alone with Taryn and with Madison's characters and feel what they're feeling. And he said, I think that's just an important part of your filmmaking. And as soon as he said that, I was like, wow, that's what we need in this movie. That scene was not in the movie, and I was just like, we do need, this is why this is a female director. I mean, I'm sure, maybe this is why I'm directing this movie, female or not, but I want to be with her. I want to know what she's feeling. And all those things that you guys just said you got out of that scene is so gratifying to me, because that's exactly what I wanted this one scene to convey. And so yeah, that gave me the idea to put that scene in the movie. I'm so happy you liked the underwear. I agree. I wrote that scene just for the underwear.
Let's spend a little bit of time talking about kind of the evolution of the script and how it was to be working on it. And I guess the first thing is, did you know right away from reading the script that this was a huge social and political issue?
I was so conflicted, and I think this is what's a really interesting lesson about making movies or writing scripts or development. I read the script, and there were, like Hannah said in her email, there was something so amazing about it. It was a great script written by Casey Schroen, a man who went to Columbia, and he lives in New York. He's wonderful. And something about it really grabbed me, but it was written 10 years ago, and the premise for the story, the part I really responded to, and I don't want to give anything away, is like really from what now is like the end of the first act or middle of the first act through the end. And there was a lot of stuff leading up to that didn't work for me for two reasons. One, it was just a bit dated. It was really a coming out story, and it was about trying to change the fact that she was gay, and just stuff that I just felt dated, and I just didn't feel authentic to me, especially today. And so I really wanted her sexuality just to be part of who she was and not something she was antagonized for. And so, what am I saying? So anyway, I really needed to change, that had to change. The other part that made me not sure if I wanted to do it is that the abuse towards women was so, from such a male perspective, written by a man, and the men had so much power that I felt like it was exploitative and potentially really damaging to women to see a movie where that's happening yet again. And we see those movies all the time, and I don't like those moments in movies. And I think you can have the same humiliation, the same negative impact without telling it through those eyes. And I didn't want to make that movie, but I wanted to make a lot of the movie. And so, you know, I talked to Hannah about it, my manager at the time said I shouldn't do it. I was just really very torn because I wanted to do it, but I didn't want to do it the way it was. And so luckily I had so much support from the studio. I kept saying, what movie are we making? Are we making this movie or are we making this movie? And she was like, just go make a Valerie Weiss movie. Make it like you make any other movie. And I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? Because I'm going to do that if you say that. So there was that, and then I went back to the writer, and well, I don't know, how much do you want me to go into this now? Yeah, okay. So I went back to the writer who had done a draft that we sort of superficially gave him an idea for a draft, and it was a bad idea, and he did a whole draft, and it was not good, and so he was kind of done. He did not want to do any more rewriting, and so I was kind of stuck because I'd kind of convinced myself to do the movie, but the script wasn't there, and I was like, what am I going to do? And so I asked the exec if I could talk directly to the writer, and she said yes. So I called Casey, and it ended up being this 4-hour phone call where I literally just asked him questions, and I said, what is the protagonist feeling? Why does she do this? Why does the antagonist? I just asked question after question, because I was like, if I direct your movie, I need to know the answers to this, because my actors are going to want to know. And it ended up opening this whole dialogue about what needs to change, and I pitched him my thoughts about how we could change this movie. And by the end of the call, he was like, okay, how do you want to do this? Do you want to rewrite it? Do you want me to do it? I want my movie made, and I want you to do it. What do I have to do? And it was amazing because he was so on board, and it really has become this very special thing. He hasn't seen it, but he came out to set and saw the performances, and I think he's really proud and excited that we were able to, to make this new version of it.
Mm-hmm. So in some ways you might say it's not always knowing exactly what to do, but knowing the right questions to ask.
I think so too. I think so too. I know we'll talk about the Amazon project, but I just did this very different movie, a family film for Amazon, and the casting directors just told me that my cast, they got all these calls from their reps saying how much they loved working with me, and they said what was so striking was that when we were in the callbacks that I asked questions to the actors. I wanted to know what they thought, and I mean, of course I do. Like, we're all working together. I want to know what Ruth thinks. I want to know what Sarah thinks. I want to know what Alexis thinks, and that conversation, I think, gets you to the truth that you're talking about. Because if it's not true, you guys are not going to respond to it. So I think questions, and maybe that's why I was a scientist. I think that's how I access my collaboration.
And I was referring to this earlier, but the actual social and political issue that's involved in the film, I'd like to kind of, because that probably helped shape the script, because it's like, well, how do you reach people with this issue in a way that they're going to do something about it?
Yeah, so that is a huge part of why I started. I wrote a director's statement back in probably February or March that talked about how in the 80s, when I was in school, girls were told they could be anything they wanted to. I mean, there was no question for me that there would have been a female president by now, and that's why I went into science thinking there would be no issues. And I cannot believe in 2016 there are still so many obstacles to self-actualization for women on every level. And so I think this was just, Trump was an idea in the race back then, And I remember putting a line in my director's statement, which was a document that was accessible. It was online, password protected, but like anyone involved in the production could read. And I remember there was a line about specifically referencing Trump and Hillary, and I remember Hannah saying, I love this, I think we should just maybe take this one line out because it's politically polarizing. And the fact that, I'm sure she would not say that now, but the fact that things have devolved so much, and yet you could see that coming for me back then, and that we even are having this presidential race, and that Michelle Obama even has to give that speech, and it's just shocking to me, and that is a really big part of why I wanted to do this movie. And, there's a lot of gender and political issues. This story, I'm sort of blowing it a little bit, but you already know there's a juvenile detention center, and it's a for-profit prison. And part of Hillary's campaign was to get rid of these for-profit prisons on the federal level. They've decided not to have them, but that's only 13 prisons. There are way more at the state level, so there's still a long way to go, but you can just imagine the conflict of interest or having these prisons. And then to go a little deeper, I just read an article that showed that the girls in these prisons are in there for much more minor infractions than the boys in these prisons, because there's such a societal bias about how girls are supposed to behave, and it's echoed at the police level and the court level. And there's just, I hope that this movie does a lot to sort of show these really insidious attitudes.
And there actually are a couple of Republican senators who are trying to pass laws to kind of ameliorate this situation right now. So can you imagine using this film as a tool of political activism as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really, really hope that this movie gets a lot of attention and people talk about it, because if you responded that strongly just to the changing room scene, which is in the beginning of the film, I can only imagine how you're going to feel at the end of this heroine's journey in this movie, because it is fraught and it is intense, and I think it's a good metaphor for what a lot of girls and women go through in a patriarchal system that is just finding all... I find, sorry to get political, but the one thing nobody's talking about is, there's one letter I saw online, that letter from women to Trump that I posted on Facebook. I thought was brilliant. But in the first debate, when he says, "Is it okay to call you that? I just want you to be happy." Do you guys remember when Trump said that?
Oh, yeah.
Are they on a fucking date? I'm sorry, but what that attitude of this sort of disempowering a woman by saying, "I want you to be happy," that's already diminishing her as a real opponent. And there was so much wrong in that statement, and I think when you watch this movie, you will see in our antagonist this Trump complex of, you need me, I make you strong, you're only strong because I let you be strong, which is a more subtle version of sexism that people don't really talk about, but I think it's way more pervasive. So I really hope this movie brings light to that.
And did you experience some of this in graduate school as well?
Oh, so long ago, grad school. You know what I love about scientists, and probably why I did that first, is I feel like as a culture, it was a lot more respectful, because it's a lot more intellectual. It's a lot more about the topic and the science. And so I, for whatever reason, was lucky enough to choose really great advisors and role models. And so off the top of my head, I'm feeling like I didn't experience that so much. I mean, I've seen it a lot more and experienced it a lot more in Hollywood than in science. And I know it exists for sure if you look at the statistics in science, but I think it's way worse in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Long answer.
No, it's a good answer. It's a good answer. So this is actually a question for you and Ruth. Sarah, is that? Yeah. You and Ruth and Sarah. While you were making The Archer, what were some of the most difficult times that you faced? Like, did you have dark nights of the soul or sleepless nights? And what was it about?
Sleepless because we were editing.
Yeah, but what was it about the project how did you get through all these times? I'll bring the microphone down here, Ruth. I don't want to embarrass you, and then we can pass it up to Sarah, because I'm sure that the three of you had some conversations along the way.
I don't even know where to begin.
I think every night was sleepless for you with the budget.
This movie was really, really hard, only because we had such a great, strong vision from Mallory, and it was my job to help fulfill it. And given budget limitations, time limitations, we shot this entire movie in 15 days. Everything, every little detail was, needed to be perfected, and every minute needed to be totally savored, because if we lose a minute, we'll lose 10 by the end of the day, and 10 minutes gives you 2 more takes that you probably really want. So every day was really tough. I spent a lot of sleepless nights, but for the better of the film. So.
And you never showed it. I mean, I can't say enough amazing things about Ruth and what a professional she is. And you know, my job is hard, but at least I can go to my producer and complain and whine, and she just never cracked. She was just a comfort from beginning to end, and I've never really had that experience. She's incredible.
Thanks, Valerie. There's some, I think people, as if most people have been on set and worked on films, like it's such a collaborative process, and I'm lucky enough as a producer to have great heads of department that I've worked with, my line producer, my production coordinator. Like those are the guys who saw me crack, and I was like, I'm walking in the room, I'm closing it, I'm just gonna talk out loud, take it in, let's try to fix it. So I had a great team that worked with me, including Sarah, who had a lot of sleepless nights and early mornings, and we all talked through it, so.
Sarah, do you want to jump in here? There, at the risk of stirring up a hornet's nest, and having studied mythology for a long time, there's a kind of sense that thousands of years ago, when we had a matriarchy, that everything ran smoothly and everyone got along. And I'm just wondering if that was the case in the editing room as well. Were there any meltdowns?
Wait, has he not seen Shits and Giggles, our web series?
That's probably the most creative thing to come out of this project besides the movie is our 4-episode, like, watched by hundreds.
Yeah, or 27 people.
On Facebook. No, we just, because it was such a short amount of time, and the story is near and dear to my heart as a lesbian woman and a lesbian filmmaker, I wanted to put as much love into the screen and to make the movie as best as it can be and do it within a very tight schedule. So, I mean, we worked 7 days a week, many, many weeks, and then I also unfortunately had the issue of my father passed away.
Wow.
Like basically the week after you finished shooting. So I had my last week of editor's cut and was working and actually cut that scene, the fight scene in Texas, like right after I'd seen him at the hospital before, like maybe a week before he died.
Wow.
So, and he's sort of similar to our male bad guy in the movie. So it was very wrestling with a lot of emotions while making this film. So it was almost like the movie became like a way to deal with that loss by just digging in and just, I think, working even more, which is good for the movie.
Thank you. I mean, you worked, your heart and soul is in this movie, and I'm so grateful. Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely, I love it. I can't wait to see it.
Again.
Even though there's still more stuff to do to it. But.
Yeah.
So at the risk of, again, maybe getting into trouble, for me, when I watched the film, for me it wasn't like something that gets labeled as a gay movie at all. It was just one aspect of who she was as a human. And I think that's another thing that's very special about it. And the way that it was shot and edited, the intimate scenes, you know, they were done with such a sensitivity, which you'll see at 2 o'clock when you watch the film. But maybe we can kind of transition into the Amazon project, because it seems like as soon as you finished this, there was another project that came up. So how did that happen, Valerie?
Do you want to show the last clip, or should we go? We can go into the Amazon project. We want to say that. You know, you got a plan.
No,
Sorry.
actually, I like your plan better.
Really? Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So strike everything I've said in the last 2 minutes from the record, including the matriarchy, because I don't know what I'm talking about. Really, it's one of those, you know, men do this thing, they hear something once and then they repeat the fact 20 times, and there's no way to fact check it. So we'll edit everything out from the matriarchy on, we'll keep Sarah's, and we'll get back to the last clip. Would you like to introduce the last clip?
Sure. So.
It's getting hot up here. And by the way, is that Lincoln Park After Dark that you're wearing?
What? What?
Your nail polish?
I don't know. What is Lincoln Park After Dark?
It looks just like that.
Really?
Just like that. Yeah. Has anyone heard of Lincoln Park After Dark? Okay.
What is that? Is that a color?
Thanks.
Really?
It is a color, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Huh? Just on the toes. Got it underneath. underneath the manly keen shoes.
Gotta be ready for everything.
Yes.
So this clip, so this is also pretty early on, this Trump-like antagonist that we have in this movie is also skilled at archery, and I think the only thing I want to say is this is an example of what I talked about, is this idea that he's enabling her, but is he really, and whatnot, so.
And that there's also bringing a certain level of authenticity into it, and in your research you...
Yeah, so, okay, so I can talk about this. So when we cast Bailey shortly after I met her at Mill Valley, it was, again, authenticity is really important to me, and this is a movie about archery, so I, said we gotta learn some archery, Bailey, and so we went to Pasadena Roving Archers, which is actually where they shot part of the Errol Flynn Robin Hood movie, and were trained by the best, like actually a level 3 Olympic coach that Ruth found. And so, but the first lesson, just Bailey and I went together, and because I don't think Ruth was even on board at that point, it was so early, and we shot some archery, and I noticed that there were no sights on the bow. And I asked and I didn't notice this till the end of the session, and I asked our teacher, why? And he said, it's interesting. It's kind of like yoga or any other sort of Zen thing where you want to feel it. You don't want to worry about precision till later. You just want to feel where the bullseye is. And wow, that's so interesting. And this was during the script development phase with Casey. And I called him up and I was like, Casey, we got to talk. I think I figured out what our theme is. I think I got it. And just this idea of instinct and how somebody can undermine your idea of instinct. And if it's instinct, how can someone undermine it? And just anyway, I thought that there was this great metaphor in there of archery that we could use for this movie. And so the scene actually completely came out of that experience.
Yeah, and it gives more texture to the antagonist, bringing this kind of wisdom into it. So let's take a look at clip number 3 from The Archer.
This was a camp. Parents used to send their children here to train with a real live Olympian. You want to go home? I want to make sure you learn something before you do. Get that, and you can go.
There's no sights.
No, there's no sights. You have to feel it. The strongest shoot on instinct. You rely on sights, you rely on something outside of yourself. Instinct, Lauren, is very quiet. Can't hear it with all this other noise, anger, pity, these other girls. That's the wobble drowning it out. When you drill that, you won't need me anymore. That's when you can go.
So let's start with you guys. What comes up for you while you watch this scene? What kind of feelings come up? What kind of thoughts or observations?
Hillary has to win. Because we cannot just, this kind of man cannot be our president. That's what I've been thinking.
You want to handle that?
I don't know if I want to tango with Milena.
So
he's got menace.
That's what I thought.
he feels menacing, and what is it about what you see that makes him feel menacing? So you've got the contrast of him giving advice, but what feels menacing?
There's something about the way he's talking quietly, that he is acting in control, that just is, it's just menacing. It's, Michaelvitz used to call people and he would whisper. And when he was whispering, people didn't know if he was being encouraging or threatening them. And it's a technique. And so he's menacing. I don't know that he knows that in the moment, but he's menacing.
I don't see it that way at all. I see it as he's encouraging her, he's enabling her and building her sort of anger inside, saying, if you want to achieve something, or whatever you're trying to achieve, you need to focus. And I'm, that's my method of gearing you up, but this is what you need to do. So I saw it as a positive.
Yeah.
Reminded me of the last presidential debate. But I'm serious. Yeah. It was intimidating and stalking and dark.
Yeah.
Him lurking behind her.
Yes.
To me, he seemed very possessive of her. Like you said, the whole like then you won't need me. Like who said that she needed you to begin with?
So he seemed possessive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different kind of observations coming out of the one scene.
I think he seemed to think that we had to do away with emotions in order to succeed. So he was like, you have this pity and this thing, and these are girls, or whatever he called it. And again, it's I think the patriarchal principle of like, let's do away with emotions in order to really be a warrior or whatever. So that, that stood out to me.
Yeah, nice point. Jen, you can just talk a little louder.
What flashed into my head was, didn't Yoda take the same approach with Luke in the swamp? In a sense, like, very, it's in you, dig deep, you gotta find it, it's not me.
He's clearly seen Star Wars.
Actually, I'm an archer, and he was giving excellent advice.
Yeah.
He was really, that's what you need to do.
And I think you really want to have that kind of ambivalence of feelings that come up. And what about his proximity to her? How did that feel?
Well, he
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, he's not just giving advice, he's the gatekeeper.
Uh-huh.
He's telling her, I'll decide when you can come, when you can go. And so that's very different from Yoda.
Yeah.
Yoda doesn't say, you're gonna stay here till I'm ready for you to leave.
Good point.
I love that
It's like,
distinction.
it has nothing to do with the crime.
Mhm.
He's telling her, I'll decide when you go. And actually, she's supposed to have a sentence based on her crime, right?
Right.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense how he can decide when she's gonna go.
So it's a very dark manipulation, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what feeling does that bring up for you while you're watching it?
Well, I'm from Russia 3 years ago, so it brings a lot of memories.
I bet it does. I bet it does. So it's something that's woven into the society there. Yeah. Yes?
Hi. So, I'm not like really religious, but there is a line in the Bhagavad Gita for the Buddhism, I think it is, where if you what is it? It's
Hinduism.
Thank you. I just read it, thought it was interesting. But where they actually use an archer for focus on the eye of the bird, and it looked like that's where he was going. But once he took over and did it himself, he made it very competitive, and he just destroyed his entire lesson. Like, instead of having her focus, he made it more competitive, and that was very demeaning. Like, just, if you're gonna train someone, like, let them discover the journey instead of, like, forcing them to do it the way you do. So, it was kind of angry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I saw a positive and a negative. The positive is he was trying to teach her to compartmentalize, which is what you do need to do in life, especially if you have an angry person who's in prison or in jail for doing something wrong.
Yeah.
They need to learn how to compartmentalize. But as the woman down front said, the problem with what his lesson was, it was sort of a moving target. When he said, when you do this, then you can leave, and you would think that someone who's in jail has a defined term of her imprisonment. And that would be when she would be able to be free, not when she can hit, according to what he says. So that was the problem that I had, and that's metaphorical because there's this target that when he shoots it, it moves. So
Kind of like professionally, if there's a man you're working for and there's a goal for success, but there's a back door potentially if you do this for me.
Right. So positive, one thing he said was good, but the other thing he said was really sinister.
It was interesting too, because there's this strong likeness to the TV show Kung Fu, where the main character is a student and he has to snatch a pebble from his master's hand before he can actually leave, and he can't do it for 15 years or something. But there's something about that it provides a very strong contrast because the masters are so different. I mean, I think if you looked at them back to back, you'd see how malicious he is, whether he means to be or not, in contrast to this Shaolin monk, who is it's like just stating a fact in a gentle way.
Right, so I think one of the things to learn from watching this scene is how important the subtext is, because it's really the subtext that, while the audience is watching it, a lot of people will have their own individual view of it. Some of the things will be shared, but you can see in the contrast within the antagonist character. He's not just a one-dimensional antagonist, but that contrast brings all the subtext up, and it's the subtext that connects with the audience even sometimes more than the text. We probably want to go ahead.
Sure. I just want to say how happy I am to hear all these thoughts, because this is one scene and there's so many interpretations and you're all right. And a scene like this that comes early in the movie has a big job to do, and we wanted it to do all these things, and you never know, does it do all these things? And so I'm really happy that there's conflict with how it's interpreted and different points of view. And so thank you so much for sharing that with me.
We'll have time for Q&A. I would like for Valerie to tell us a little bit about this most recent project, and it seemed like it came right on the tail of The Archer.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a weird summer, because I made this movie, and then right after, literally right during our sound mix, I had to leave our sound mix to go to auditions for this other very different movie, which is, do you guys know the American Girl doll brand? Yeah? So I just directed an American Girl movie for Amazon, which I'm so psyched about because I have 2 daughters who are obsessed with American Girls, and literally I got a call from this woman who's now my agent. She actually got me the job without even being my agent, which made it obvious that she should be my agent. Leaving my composer's house for this, and I was like, oh my God, Paul, I got an interview to direct an American Girl movie, and I went home and told my 8-year-old, and we literally jumped up and down screaming for 10 minutes. It was just so cool to share that with her. So, Amazon is doing these 4 original specials. So, it's a total redo of the brand, nothing to do with the previous movies. And each one is about 45 minutes, and each one is a different doll. I'm doing the second one. The first one comes out October 21st. It's the Melody doll, and it's about 1963 civil rights. She's an African-American doll. She's so cute and awesome. And so that just had a premiere last week, and it's a great, important, hard-hitting movie. And so my movie's quite different. It's 1955 Daytona Beach, and it's the Mary Ellen doll, and she is a little girl who wants to see snow and have a real Christmas. And in this movie, she learns the importance of listening and empathy and not just standing out to stand out. And I think, the connection with my previous work is that there's a strong gender role issue because it's the 50s, and she learns that her mom, who's an amazing mom who runs a house of 5 kids, used to be a boss at an airplane factory, and so she is like amazed that girls can do that, and someday maybe girls can do other things. So that was really important to me to tell that story. And also, the mother-daughter bond is, I think, really what sparkles in this story. So I was really happy to revisit that theme.
And these were both short shooting schedules, The Archer and this.
This
and
was 8 days.
What was the script like when you went through?
It's so it was an 8-day shoot for 45 minutes. It was a great script written by Jamie Pacino, who again talk about diverse projects. She writes on Chicago PD, so she's a really smart writer who is great at writing heartfelt moments that are not sappy or corny. And so I read the script, and there was a bit of a process of development with the executive, Jane Starts, who's the EP on it, who's amazing. She did Tuck Everlasting and lots of amazing kids programming, and Amazon, the executives there, Christina Reynolds, I worked with closely, is so smart. And yeah, I don't think there was it was a much smaller development. I mean, the script was pretty much as is. It was trims and, refining things, but it was a cool experience to work with two producers and a network and sort of navigate and learn what that process was like. But luckily, they were so great, and we agreed, I'd say 99% of the time. So that it really was just sort of about affirming what we all thought and having great people to talk about it with, and yeah, great experience.
And what was it like finding the actress to play Mary Ellen?
So when I came on board, they'd actually already made an offer to her. So she's I don't know if I can say who she is. I'm gonna wait because I think they have to announce who. I don't know. We just had I don't know. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but she's a really talented young actress who has worked quite a bit, and just lovely and so amazing to work with. Yeah.
And did you use any of the same crew from The Archer?
No, I tried so hard. I tried to get our the only two spots that were open were our DP and our composer. Everybody else is a team, an amazing team that they work with on all their productions. And but they wanted a DP just with more more television experience for what they were looking for. So I had a great new DP, Steve Gaynor, who I love and had a great rapport with, and the composer that we're working with is Sasha Gordon, who does she does all this stuff for Amazon as well, and she did I Believe in Unicorns, a really important indie film that Leah Meyerhoff, who started Film Fatales, directed, and yeah, but an amazing team.
And was this I guess you'd call it an anthology of stories. Was there anything about the format of each story that needed to be the same, or did you have complete structural freedom with it?
Good question. I think, American Girl, the company, which is an awesome company, I've gotten to meet, the president and a lot of the executives from there now. And I think they just wanted it to really feel like the brand and echo their values, which are very strong. But my episode is very different than the first episode that's directed by Tina Mabry, who directs Clean Sugar, and she did Mississippi Damned, and she's an amazing filmmaker. So, no, I think they're all sort of independent of each other.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, this feels like a good time to open up for questions from the audience, and I'll walk around with the microphone so you can all
Oh, and
hear
I'll just
what
say
the
that
questions
that
are.
Amazon project premieres Thanksgiving, so
Yes.
please watch it.
Yeah.
Hi, Valerie. So there's a study out that most women, not most women, but a lot of women don't get as big of a budget, but have a higher sort of return on investment in their projects. Can you comment on maybe your short shooting time, or why you were given such a short shooting time, or?
Well, short just because the budget dictates it. I mean, really, your days are, you get this budget, and I think, whatever business model Mar Vista has, that's the amount of money that there was for this particular project, and probably especially because we were, taking some risks to go in a little different direction than they typically do, and we have an amazing cast, but I don't think they are bankable stars in terms of, guaranteeing a return. So, honestly, it's always great to have more money, but I love having freedom, and I had so much freedom on that film, and I really wouldn't trade it. I mean, I know Ruth would probably want more money more than I would, but I mean, this is all I know. I mean, the Amazon was a much bigger budget for me, which is great, but creatively, at the end of the day, I don't know that it feels that different. I think the project needs, what you put on the screen has to dictate your budget.
Okay, coming over. Hi. Hey, hi.
This looks like such an exciting film, so I can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
And I didn't see what came before that scene where the archer master is guiding her that way, so but I first wanted to ask you, did you by any chance consult with Angela Davis about, women and girls in prison, because she's such a resource for...
No, I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar with who Angela Davis is. Should I be?
Yes.
Oh, jeez. Oh, my God. So tell me, who's Angela Davis?
Well, I would say she's one of the most significant women in the women's movement, but also she's a social activist and on many different levels. She's a teacher I saw her there at UC Santa Cruz, and I was thinking of taking her history of consciousness class, actually, and I was in awe. I'd met her several times, but a wonderful resource if you ever need more info. If people start asking you questions, you could just read some about what she's studied. She's done great studies about women in prisons and all the mistreatment and injustices. So
Great, I would definitely will check her out. I'd love her to see this too.
and I just wanted to say that a compliment to you and all of your, filmmaker buddies, that I was able to feel the masculine and the feminine points of view at the same time, because my dad was a golfer, and the same type of talk, and having empathy for the way he talks and seeing beyond the words of how he came across the intimidation, seeing underneath the intimidating, but he really wanted her to be a master so she wouldn't hit again. She wouldn't act out her emotions. That's men have to teach themselves not to act out their emotions, so they have to be tough. They almost have to wrestle with themselves to keep silent. So I think he was trying to teach some, even though it came across as demeaning in a certain way, so it is interesting, that very interesting complex.
Thank you for saying that. I'd actually like to address that, Tom, if you don't mind.
Please.
So, in this film, actually, I've never worked with a female DP. I've always worked with male DPs, and I think with The Archer, and I even felt it actually a little bit with the Amazon project, but on The Archer in particular, I think it was really neat to work with a male cinematographer because he's amazing, Adam Santelli. I love him. But what we would do is we'd sit down and we'd go through a scene, and he would have such a different take on it. For instance, the changing room scene. He read it, and he was like, he had a whole different view. He's like, no, there's no guard. She's alone, and this happens, and just a very different, more masculine. He didn't think it was emotional. He didn't think we should have close-ups. He didn't think we should have a POV of those underpants. Killer. And it was so interesting. I was like, no, then you are missing the point of the scene. But by having to have that dialogue and figure out what the scene is and explain my point of view, I think it only made the movie stronger. And it was only when he saw it, and he's so proud of the movie, that he was like, I understand what you were doing in that scene. I didn't know what you were doing, and that's beautiful and that's amazing. And anyway, it was just a really nice collaboration, almost like a mother and father, like that. I don't know, I think that bridge that you're talking about, and I think that is a fresh, interesting point of view where it is a female director and a female perspective, but it doesn't lose sight of the male perspective, and I'm really proud of that. So thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you.
It felt real to me.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate about, well, first of all, I thought we were going to see another scene from the Amazon project, so it does sound like that would by the way. So some people will look at this and they'll go, well, this is lesbian exploitation film, The Archer. Like, all we see of the women is them undressed or in very vulnerable clothing compared to the men. Or we see them undressed in the first scene, or, lovemaking. We see them taking their clothes off in the other scene. How is this movie different, and why would feminists think they really need to see this film?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy you said that. Elena, put that sweatshirt back on and stand up and show her the uniform. The not exploitative outfit that these women are wearing most of the movie. So first of all, you saw a couple clips out of a whole movie, so you don't have the context yet. But, this is how they're mostly dressed. So there you go. Well, I have so much to say to that. First of all, it's so interesting because when I read the script, it was what you were talking about, and that scared my dark night of the soul was waking up before we changed the script, being like, I can't make this movie, but I want to make this movie. And by the time we made the movie, I don't think there's an ounce of that left. And again, it was interesting to have a male cinematographer because he reads the script and he reads certain scenes you don't even know about, and he's like, whoa, and I was like, he said, what if we shoot it a different way? What if it's not in that place that it's set? And I was like, no, but it's emotional, it's tender, it's not exploitative, that's not how I see it. And he was so worried as a guy who is sensitive to these issues that it wouldn't come across that way, that again, it was a really good marriage, because and I can talk more, ask me at the Q&A what those scenes were, because he almost bent over backwards to have it not be that way, and I was like, no, trust. So I think it could have been that way. I don't think it's that way, and I have my team of lesbians here to vouch for the fact that it doesn't do that, and I would say 90% of our focus group, we were lesbians at all times, and as some of them say, it's the best lesbian movie they've ever seen, so I can't vouch for that. I'm not gay, and so I'm so grateful that you guys had eyes on this and that it meets your approval, so there we go. Yes.
To touch on that, I'm really happy that you were able to take a script that was originally like that and turn it into, it's not like the focus isn't on her sexuality, but instead on the character and the person, because the person isn't just their sexuality. So I'm really excited to see this film because of that.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So my question has to do with when you sent the script for The Archer to your friend, the film critic, to ask him for recommendations. What did he recommend that you watch?
Yeah, so let me think back. There's a movie called Girlfriend, a French movie. Did you guys ever see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so good, and I feel like that was really useful just to show what the camera can do. There's a shot in there where that movie's about a young woman who things are not going well at school or at home, and so she gets involved in a gang, but a little bit different than you think of as an American gang, more like Girls Who Fight, and not as heartbreaking or as violent necessarily as like an American gang, but she's at this point where she's got a little sister who she takes care of, and she's at the sink washing dishes, and she picks up this knife that's a switchblade, which is a little weird why it's in the sink, but let's go with it. I was like, maybe in France they have knives like this, I don't know. But the camera, God, I have to remember the shot, but it just does this amazing, I forget what it did, but I think it starts on the knife and slowly, that's what it was, I think it slowly goes up her arm and lands on her face, but it takes forever. But in that moment, it gives the audience the chance to have the same thought process at the same pace she would, which is, I'm going to join this gang, I'm going to use this knife. And it's so simple, but it was so in touch with her inner life, and wordless and just beautiful, beautiful. And it sort of echoed what he was saying to me about private moments. And I was like, it made me think about what's my private moment in this movie. So I think that one had the biggest impact. I have to think about what the other ones are. My husband told me a movie, again, when I was thinking about how do I make this movie not what I don't want it to be, he found this Norwegian movie called Flukt, F-L-U-K-T, that is so good. It's a period movie from the 1100s. I mean, it's made today, but it's this really just incredible, brave young woman whose family gets killed and she gets kidnapped and she has to escape, and the little girl in that reminds me a lot of you, Alexis. You should see it. It's really good. But anyway, it's just really sort of changed. It informed our visual style a lot. So Yes, okay. Can I call on people too?
Sure.
Okay, Milena.
I have a question about, we see a male teacher in the life of the heroine. What about male teachers in your life? What was your experience, whether it's like mentors,
Yeah.
or just your bosses who taught you something?
Yeah, I have a really strong history of incredible male teachers, all of whom, now that I realize, I'm still in touch with. And maybe that's why I really like the male-female cinematographer-director collaboration, because maybe I'm very comfortable with that. I don't know, that just occurred to me. But I had a teacher from 2nd grade to 6th grade, Mr. Hirschman. It was like a gifted program, you know, like where they pull kids out for a day and you get to do more creative, stimulating activities than you would in your classroom. And so that really influenced me tremendously, and I still talk to him because with my own kids, we're wondering whether our school should have that program, so he sort of gives me advice about everything education. But I think he really, I don't know that I would be a filmmaker without him, because he taught me that it's okay and valuable to think outside the box and important to do that. And then my biology teacher, I mentioned, Mr. Sharambura, again, it was like an out-of-the-box way of thinking about biology. It just wasn't about the textbook. It was about greater connections to the world around us. And, you know, he saw my first movie, and it was a great way to reconnect. And then more recently, my PhD advisor, Jim Hogel, who was incredible because, and there's a great connection there. So he solved the 3D structure of poliovirus in the 80s, which is a big freaking deal because it was one of the first viruses that they could figure out the molecular structure of. And so this movie for Amazon has a polio storyline. So I was able to say I worked in a polio lab. So anyway, he was just great because he was really supportive of me having an artistic pursuit. And all these men were like the least sexist men you'd ever meet. And so I think that it was important.
There's a lot of talk about the difference between, and I get the terminology mixed up, like the male lens and the female lens, like how women see stories, how men see stories, and how women and men sometimes will see a completely different movie even though they're sitting next to each other in the film, which can happen in a few Jane Campion movies, for example. That's another workshop in itself. But there is a, what is it called? It's not the male gander. That sounds like a National Geographic. Gaze, yeah. Because I know Jill, the male gander sees the pond in a completely different way than the female gander. And there's a scene in Light Beneath Their Feet and a scene in The Archer where it's a female voyeuristic view in The Light Beneath Their Feet and a male voyeuristic view. Maybe you can just say a little bit about the difference in shooting those and what was happening.
Sure. So Light Beneath, for anyone who hasn't seen it, the young woman is obsessed with this boy who is an outcast because he had sex with the teacher in middle school, and everybody knows about it. It was on the news. She went to jail, but she's obsessed with him, probably because not only he's hot, but he's also because she feels, because of her mom, that she's fringe and maybe feels like a more functional relationship. Maybe she wouldn't be chosen by someone in a more stable relationship, more stable background, or whatever. There's a lot of ideas. But anyway, so she's obsessed with this boy, or wants to save him, and he is sleeping with another girl in the school, and she follows him one night to this other girl's house for an innocuous reason, to give him change from the ice cream shops. Really, she's a big nerd, so it's totally stupid, but I totally relate. So she follows him and discovers him having sex with this other girl, and she's a virgin and very inexperienced at all in love, and instead of leaving, she just kind of stays and watches. And not only that, but a couple nights later, she actually leaves home and goes and to watch again because she's just really obsessed with him, and he ends up seeing her watch and follows her out, and that's the beginning of the relationship. So it's pretty unusual. So it was interesting. I think the hardest part about that is the writer wrote that, so it's not from my own imagination. So I think that was one of the hardest parts to get my brain around, because I can't imagine a world where I would do that. And many of the people I talked to couldn't imagine a world where they would do that. But then some people could. Like my editor on that film actually very much related to it and fought for it. And people would be split when they'd watch it. But I think what's important about it is we actually even showed it to two mom friends, and one said it's just not feminine, or she has no self-esteem if she would do that. And I thought that was so interesting, because I think there's a lot of people who might feel that way, but I also think what a messed up society that we have that would be taught to anybody, or that we'd pass that messaging down to our girls, that it's not okay to be interested in sex or be drawn to somebody who's sexual. And so I think it's an important scene in that movie. And then in this movie we have a peeping scene that's the reverse. It's one of the male guards and our protagonist, and he's got his own boatloads of dysfunction, and he kind of does it for a similar reason actually that our main character in Light Beneath does, and this frustration and this lack of intimacy and this desire to connect in the only way they can connect. And so I'm hoping with both scenes that it doesn't feel exploitative. I don't think they feel exploitative, but I think that you empathize with a person who can only connect that way.
Thanks. Yes.
I'm trying to distill like one question out of this, but we met last year opening night at Mill
I
Valley.
remember across the street
And you
at the
were
restaurant.
so sweet. You came up to us and asked us what we were doing. We found out immediately that you have 2 girls, I have 2 girls, another woman that we were with has 2 kids, my producing partner has 2 girls. And then we became friends on Facebook, and I started following you because you became a very real role model for me as a filmmaker and a peer who is able to sustain this career while also being an involved mother, which I'm noticing from your posts. And so I'm trying to find a question in it, but it's mainly just like it's a challenging career regardless. Yeah. And then you throw a family into the mix, and if you're an involved and mindful parent,
yeah,
the hoops you have to go through to be able to do this, not just once,
right,
but over and over again. And so for a long time when I had small children, I was helping people develop their own things, but not able to get on set myself because, who has 3 to 4 weeks that they can work 15 hours a day?
Right.
And at the point where I'm just doing it because you just have to. But you're doing it over and over again, back to back to back.
Yeah.
And still, an active member of your own family. So I'm just super curious. Like, it's probably an offline conversation.
No, I think it's a very relevant question. I think it's it's a big question, and the only thing I can say is I used to think before I made my very first film, and I actually blogged about this, that everything had to be different. I had to have a rich husband. I had to have made my first feature before I had my first baby. I had all these rules set up for how a woman director needs to structure her life to succeed. And then I figured out it's all bullshit, because you can never control any of those things, and you're just gonna wither up and die if you think there's a have to first. And I think, so much of what these movies are about are that you don't need somebody else, and you do have the power in you, and it is just taking a little bit more of a holistic approach to your life, which is I need this. Like, I can't be a good mom if I'm not doing this job, and I can't live up to my expectations, which is really not about success, but about putting something into the world I think is important and that I'm proud of. And so that's non-negotiable for me, that I've figured out. And then everything else has to be negotiable. Like, I'll make a movie, an action film for a very low budget that maybe somebody else wouldn't have done because it's hard on me, hard on my family, and I might not be able to get a drone, but I got to make my movie, And so you start finding the other ways to do it, and every time it does get easier, and I have amazing husband, and you know, we just kind of work it, and the first time you do it, it's so stressful, you think how do we even do it? And now it's like, okay, we have 5 babysitters on speed dial, and you know, the kids can, the second movie, Light Beneath, I was away for 7 weeks, and it was hard, and I promised my kids when I came home I would never go away for that long without them. And then in this Amazon project, my older one actually was the double for the lead. So she came and slept with me every night in a hotel. And that's part of why I said yes and wanted to jump up and down with her for 10 minutes, was like, oh my God, I have a feeling we can connect by my doing this. So there is no answer. It just gets easier, and once you decide, I'm just gonna do it, and I'll compromise every other which way so I can do it, then it somehow falls in place. That's the best advice I can give.
And, perfect ending to a wonderful session. Thanks so much, Valerie. It's been very inspirational, and thanks to the whole crew that's here, which is adding an extra level of enjoyment to all this. So thanks again.
Our amazing crew will be up on stage for the Q&A, so you can ask them questions too.
Yeah. And the 2 o'clock is going to be in.
Yeah, right here. Right here. Yeah.
All right, let's order in some lunch.
Yes.
And watch the sneak preview.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much from you all and from you. I just really feel like a more evolved filmmaker after having had this session. Thank you.